So you think you want to do an exhibit for National History Day? Well, let's walk through the rules, how you're going to be judged, and then talk about some of the style choices that you might make if you're going to make an exhibit. All right, if you look on the screen, there's the complete list of the rules for this category. The easier way to take a look at that would be either to go to the Google slide presentation that is with this video, or you can go to NHD.org and they have rules sheets attached there. And we'll have paper copies of the entire contest rule book and the category rules in the classroom with us. So don't try and read that whole list. Let me just tell you what the highlights are. Okay, so the highlights of the exhibit category, those rules. These aren't just the highlights. These are the ones that probably need the most reinforcement. These are the ones that people have had the most questions about. Try and tackle those as much as possible. But you do need to make sure that you get your hands on a copy of the actual list, whether it be a paper copy or go to nhd.org, and make sure that you have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about here, the highlights right now. Number one, this needs to be your work. Now, you are going to quote primary and secondary sources, but you're going to give credit where credit's due. You're going to cite those sources. But for the most part, this is your creation. This project is not something that you got a lot of help from. Mom and Dad didn't do it. It has to be your work. Number two, it has to fit within the size requirements, which are pretty big. You have 40 inches wide, 30 inches deep, and 6 feet tall. That's that cube to fill your project with, and you should use that space. It's not like, well, it can be 6 feet tall, but mine's 1.5 feet. No, it needs to fill that space. And so you have a lot of space to be creative. And I'll show you some examples of things that are creative, ways that people have used that space creatively. But so that's what you've got, is that cube. One of the things that people have done creatively is they have created things that have spun, that rotate. Judges, we have one of the judges' advisors told us that the judges like it when they have things that they can kind of play with and can see that it's creatively done. So if it's something that spins, it can't be anything more than 30 inches at its widest point, or 30 inches around. So it can only fill that space. All right. Now, rule number 3, which is one that people get confused. So I'm going to do the best I can to explain it here. If you have questions, feel free to ask. You have 500 of your words on the exhibit board, which a lot of people first hear that 500 words and they think that's a lot, but it's not. It's not very much of your own writing. All right. Anything that you have authored counts against those 500 words. The title, headings, subheadings, picture captions, which need to be there. You don't put anything up there that you don't explain what it is. So anything that you have written counts towards that 500 word limit. So that's not a whole lot to work with. Quotes, whether they be direct quotes from a primary source or direct quotes from a secondary source, do not count towards that 500 word count. Okay, but before you think, well, I'll just take a bunch of primary and secondary sources and kind of link them together, and there I've got my project. The most important element of your exhibit is your analysis, your breakdown, your telling of the story, your judgment, your argument. Your words are more important. Your analysis of those primary and secondary sources. So this is not just something where you're copying and pasting that. You need to use those 500 words judiciously, though. Okay, 500 words of your writing. If you have anything else on there, or you use any other media, it can only be 2 minutes long. So you're allowed to create short video or narration that goes with that. There are very specific rules about that, and I'm not going to dive into all of those. That's the kind of thing that you need to look up on the rule sheet. But essentially, if you're going to have anything more than that, you shouldn't be doing an exhibit. The exhibit needs to speak for itself. If you feel like you need to create a 7-minute video or something like that, 7 minutes of media to explain it, you should be doing a documentary or a website or a performance. An exhibit should speak for itself. Okay.
Look, it's not just an essay on a board.
What does that mean? Why should you do an exhibit? Well, if your research has shown you a lot of still photos, obviously that might be something that you put into that. If you've got a lot of video, you don't want to put that on an exhibit board. Also, really what should also be driving this decision is whether or not you have thought of a creative way to take advantage of the exhibit format. If you're planning just to paste some pictures up on a board, that's not the right reason to do an exhibit. What should you do with your exhibit? What are the should do's? What should you not do? And what are some of the creative ways to take advantage of the exhibit format? Let's take a look at that.
The right reason to choose to do an exhibit is that you have photos and images that tell a story. It's not an essay on a board. It's a photo essay. The photos tell the story. But even with great photos that tell the story, they need explanation. What is happening in this photo? And you are going to have to tie it all together. Remember, that's all part of this as well. Your argument is the key. So with every photo that goes on there on your exhibit board, there has to be several things must be done. All right. First, you need to give a short citation of the source. This is not the entire bibliography entry. When you get done with your bibliography entries, there's all kinds of publisher information and dates and stuff like that. Let's say you got an image from the Library of Congress. The short citation would just be Library of Congress. You would just put that on underneath the photo. The other thing that is going to go with every image that you have on the board, graph, chart, whatever you have, is a caption, an explanation of what it is. Why is this here? How does it advance the story? So everything that goes on the board like that has to be explained, has to be captioned. The citation of source does not count against your word count. You did not write the phrase Library of Congress. Your caption, this explanation, how it tells the story, that is part of your word count. Okay? Everything that goes on there has to be part of telling the story. These are the most common mistakes. People put images up there, they don't explain what they are, they don't cite the source, and they put images up there that have nothing to do with the story that they're trying to tell. I'm going to pick on my Jackie Robinson people from the past. They've got this great story of, Jackie being brave and breaking the color barrier, and then they've just got a random picture of him standing around in 1963. It has nothing to do with the story that they're going to tell. So everything that goes on that board has to be part of the background or communication and history, part of that theme, part of advancing your argument. We don't put images on there just to put them on there. Okay, so 2 different don't do's just snuck into my do's description. One, it was don't put a picture on there just for the sake of putting a picture on there, that has nothing to do with it. And don't put a picture on there that doesn't have a caption, doesn't have an explanation how it's part of the story. All right, what are some of the other don't do's? Things that people have made mistakes in the past. The bibliography does not go on the board. Your process paper, title page, they do not go on the board. All right. If you're going to paint your board, here's another don't do. Don't use water-based paint. That has caused people to have to start over. It messes up the cardboard, it warps, and you can't get it back. People have had luck with oil-based spray paints, just as an FYI. So it's kind of a, maybe do it on a test piece, see what you come up with before you start on the one that you actually want to work with. You are not part of the presentation. You are not presenting it at all. The exhibit has to speak for itself, remember? So there have occasionally people try to be part of it by dressing up in character, or, we do dress up when we have our presentation. When we have people there with us, we oftentimes go a little bit nicer dressed, but we don't become a character. All right. And don't put so much time and effort into creating a presentation that you forget to make it a history project. That you might, we've had people make the mistake of spending hours on trying to create some piece of artwork, and forget to actually do any research and have it be a history project. One final don't do is do not ask any other teachers for supplies, especially art teachers. But my art teacher loves me. Well, maybe that may be the case, but we are not asking them for their supplies. They have their own specific budget for their projects. We have some stuff that we can help provide you guys with, but otherwise, this is something that you need to provide for yourself. I have two more items to cover. The first is the should do's. And one of the things that help you kind of remember this is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Remember in Goldilocks, where Goldilocks was trying to find the chair that was not too hard and not too soft, and the porridge that wasn't too hot and too cold, and so she was looking for that just right. And there's something to be said for that. In this, you're trying to find that just right amount of everything. Be creative with your presentation, and we'll talk about a little bit more of that in just a moment. But for example, let's look at this slide that I've put together here. Yeah, there's some creativity there, but if you look at it, you can see it gone too far with our creativity here. With the background and some of the font choices and stuff like that, you can't read what it says. So that defeats the purpose. It's more than just a blank piece of white paper, but if you can't make sense of it, you've gone too far. So there are things that we need to do to be creative, and there are things that we need to do in our presentation to help them see how this is going to work. So one is, you've got to think about a way to set up your presentation so anybody viewing it knows how to look at it. They're going to come up to this thing that's 40 inches wide and 6 feet tall. Their eyes aren't going to know where to start. So you're going to have to figure out some kind of way to lead them through the story, and sometimes people have done that with real creative ways. That I remember one a few years ago where somebody was doing a project about the interstate highway system, and so they had like a map set up for the person to follow with their reading. So you have to be creative and figure that out. You do need to experiment with things like font size. Too big, and it looks like you're trying to cover something up. That old trick that students, a lot of us have tried over the years. You don't get to the 5 pages that the teacher asked for, so maybe I'll sneak it up to 15-point font and they won't notice. So too big a font and it looks like you're trying to hide something, too small and you can't read it. Again, you got to find that Goldilocks point. This is not a good time necessarily to experiment with, weird fonts that are, a handwriting font or something like that. It doesn't have to be the most old school kind of font, but it needs to be something that is easily read. So you don't want to, again, be too experimental with that. That's not the place to be creative with the font type. Okay. Other things that you need to do You skip down to that last one there. Make sure that it can be edited later. And one that comes to mind is I had a project a few years ago where they were determined that they weren't going to have anything fall apart. So they finished it and they covered the whole thing with packing tape. It wasn't going to fall apart. But as soon as you realize, well, there's a typo there and that doesn't belong on this, or any kind of change that needs to be made, they were out of luck. So you need to make sure that this is something that you can edit later. One more should do is if you are creating an exhibit, the librarians are going to have some excellent tools for you to take advantage of to create a fancy title and to really up the game in terms of how the appearance of this. A lot of this stuff they have been able to get a hold of because I was complaining so much to them that, look, we could use this, we could use that. So they have added certain tools just originally for National History Day. So let's take advantage of that. Let's be creative. Let's make this look professional. Okay. And then so that brings us up to the last item. Okay, so here's the deal. That board right there is the one that is sold by the National History Day people for this project. It fits exactly in the dimensions that they define for the exhibit. You are not required to buy that board, but we do offer it for sale here at school. We're going to ask you to talk to your partner if you have one, to talk to your parents, figure out if that's what you want to do, and we need a number of people who are going to buy this board. And so then we know how many to order. Now, that doesn't lock you into it when they actually are sent in. The way it works is if you say you want a board, you have preference for the first day or so, but then after that, we just sell them to whoever will come and buy them. $20. You can make one for yourself, probably for less than that, but it does require some labor. And you're going to be going to Walmart and buying several exhibit boards because this is bigger than, the exhibit boards that they sell at Walmart. So if that's the route you want to go, just know that you're going to need to buy more than one and engineer a way to put it together. You do not have to buy the board at all. Again, we've had conversations with parents in the past where they were upset that they had to buy the board, only to be then upset with their kid when they found out, no, you weren't required to buy the board. There were other things that you could do. But we want to start knowing how many. So there's a give and a take here. Not required to buy the board. Let's look at some of the other choices that you can come up with as well. One of my all-time favorite students with one of my all-time favorite projects finished third in state. It's not a board at all. It's a mannequin that tells the story. How about a Hollywood project it's based on film, or a Prohibition project that puts you inside a whiskey barrel, or a Triangle Factory fire that builds the Ash Building, or an atomic bomb project that builds a bomb. There's a little boy. Korean project that's shaped like Korea. Farm project that's shaped like a barn. School project where you're in a locker, or a road project where they build a road. Eleanor Roosevelt, model you in there at the bottom. How about a spinny thing in the middle of it? How about Teddy Roosevelt's conservation with a tree? Or how about a Brown versus Board project that spins so you can literally see the issue from all sides? Or a POW project where the exhibit looks like a POW camp complete with barbed wire. There's no limit to the creativity you can show here. This is a time to impress us and everybody here at Northwest. Dive in. Think about what you can come up with.